As the novel coronavirus wreaks havoc across the globe, rumors and false information have also run rampant, and the so-called infodemic has become a pressing concern. To tackle this issue, more than 300 fact-checking organizations are working worldwide to verify the authenticity of information and to correct any inaccuracies they find. The International Fact-Checking Network, or IFCN, based in Florida, brings together such organizations from all corners of the globe. Today we speak with its director, Baybars rsek, about the power of information and the importance of fact-checking.
I would say the democratization of news production, information production. Now everyone can become a publisher. So with just like one domain, with one website, you can easily pretend that you are running a reliable news organization. And then with an effective social media marketing, then you can reach out to people and can deceive them with the information that you publish, that you provide. Fact checkers and journalists were kind of on the front line, fighters against the infodemic. If, healthcare, workers, if, people who did our deliveries, who did our, groceries, were on the front lines of the pandemic. I think on the infodemic side, we as the journalists and fact checkers were on the front, lines of this fight. And it gives you that, moral satisfaction to do your job.
In 2019, fact-checkers around the world identified and corrected over 6 billion pieces of information that were false or misleading. Misinformation has increased steadily in proportion with the growing volume of information being circulated. The IFCN, or the International Fact-Checking Network, was established in 2015 to counter this trend. As the only international network of fact-checking organizations, their achievements have earned them a nomination for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. The urgent task at hand now is combating misinformation related to COVID-19.
According to a recent study by BBC, almost 6,000 people have been hospitalized just because of the falsehoods that they have seen on the internet, and people were unfortunately, losing their lives just because they were willing to try certain ridiculous, attempts to cure themselves, such as drinking bleach or injecting certain chemicals into their bodies, because people were afraid, and without any coordinated, reliable, accurate information, supply, people, unfortunately, were very vulnerable against those false information. So things like that has a big potential to harm real life, cause real life harm. So anything that has that potential is a priority for fact checkers.
So far, over 13,000 pieces of COVID-related information in 70 countries have been confirmed to be false or misleading. The IFCN makes all of these verifications available on its website. Examples include claims that it's a crime against humanity to enforce masks, and that the first woman to get vaccinated in the UK died.
One of the very striking examples of out of context, misinformation was about that, lady having a soup with bat soup. And unfortunately, even though how harmless it may sound at first sight, it was a big part of the rising anti-Asian sentiment here in the Western world. So many people in the United States, in Europe, were targeted and were attacked. It was scientifically proved that the virus was not generated because some lady, had a bad soup. But many Chinese Americans or many Asian communities around the world were targeted by that systematic racism.
rsek stresses that the harm caused by misinformation can be grave and far-reaching. The seeds of his career in fact-checking was planted during his student years.
I grew up in Istanbul, in Turkey, the largest city in the country, and then studied international relations and then did my master's on conflict resolution. So I didn't necessarily come from a journalistic background, but I would call myself as a news junkie from my teenager years. I always have been interested in the news, in politics, in anything related to like social issues. And during my master's, I was also able to do an internship in the United States, and I spent a lot of time at the Congress. And at that time, I was aware of the concept of fact-checking.
2013 became a turning point in rsek's life. After learning of the importance of fact-checking in the U.S., he had returned to Turkey when mass anti-government protests erupted in Istanbul.
When I was back in Turkey, Turkey was going under a series of protests, which we called Gezi Park protests, a popular, wave against the government at the time to demand for more freedom and, participation. And one of our assessments at the time was that the media was not doing their role, their part, to inform the public about the issues that we were, talking on any given day. So I thought about like fact-checking becoming a tool to empower people, especially youth, to hold the powerful in the country accountable. We started our fact-checking organization, Doğruluk Payı, which we can translate into English as share of truth. We founded that organization, a non-profit organization, in March 2014, just a few months before the presidential elections. Again, our goal at the time was to fact-check the statements of the candidates and then share that with the media. Turkey is not necessarily the most friendly environment for journalists. I mean, there's no secret in that. Turkey ranks at the bottom of many international indexes about press freedom, and access to politicians is easier here. My colleagues at PolitiFact right now are kind of having daily outreach to Congress people, senators, whenever they fact-check a claim about that person, and they usually get a response. In Turkey, that was not that possible because they didn't care that much. So it was a struggle from the beginning. And I also see that also a struggle for different friends in around the world as well, just because of linguistic differences.
So is everybody okay? Or more than okay?
In 2019, rsek was appointed director of IFCN, essentially the global headquarters for fact-checking organizations. He brings his experience in Turkey to the table as he strives to create a strong framework to support the international fact-checking community.
In my previous life as a professional fact-checker in Turkey, we had been struggling constantly to find reliable information from official data sources, official institutions. So those challenges teach you a lot, and sharing those challenges with others and learning from others is a big part of this work. The more that we should learn from one another and the more that we collaborate with each other, we become stronger.
The 2020 U.S. presidential election presented a challenge on a whole new level.
Great again. We are fighting the fake news.
It's all fake news. I'm changing it from fake news, though.
Doesn't that undermine?
Very fake news.
rsek feels that former President Trump's hostility towards the media had an enormous impact, both on journalism and on the nature of information.
Chinese virus.
Recently, in the last couple of years, media has been under attack and being labeled as fake news. And that's also a big trend around the world as well by politicians who are not, content with the criticism, with the scrutiny, so they attack the media. And that happens in a way that the constituencies, the people, are also becoming more reluctant to rely to, consult to authoritative news sources, and more people just, rely on their WhatsApp groups, their, messaging apps, their, Facebook groups, their Twitter feeds, and the quality of information there is not filtered, as, contrary to it was traditionally by the traditional media. So without those gatekeepers, without those reliable news outlets, unfortunately, misinformation becomes more prevalent.
So instead of turning to television, newspapers, and other traditional media, he utilized a free smartphone chat app that is popular in the US. He set up a service on the app called Fact Chat, where anyone can verify a statement made in connection with the election. For example, by typing in, "The election was rigged," users can find out who made the statement and when, as well as its veracity and how it was checked. The app was made available both in English and Spanish to make it more accessible to immigrants who can be susceptible to misinformation. He continued to push forward, fueled by a strong sense of mission, despite receiving threats to his life.
So during the election, unfortunately, we have received so many calls, emails, like targeted emails, and even, our fact-checking organizations have encountered worse of those attacks. We have seen certain threats and, had to even reach out to security, officials to make sure that they are aware of those threats, they're aware of those harassments, and, provide, certain protection measures. But it's becoming a bigger challenge for fact checkers all around the world. Just last year, more than 250 journalists have lost their lives around the world, according to Reporters Without Borders. So fact checkers are also in that, same boat with all journalists, especially in countries where the rule of freedom, rule of law, and freedom of media is under attack, and the governments are not doing their, even bare minimum to protect the journalists and the fact checkers. It is very worrisome for us, and we are trying to work with those fact checkers in countries like Greece, in Spain, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Africa. We just try to provide them with resources and tools to make sure that they are protected legally. As someone who did not necessarily have a background on journalism, but working as a journalist with journalists and fact checkers, I constantly admire the courage and the motivation that we all have for our communities. I believe in what we do, and I only worry about how we can do that better. There will be always cases and circumstances where you will be feeling, a little bit under pressure, a little bit under, risk. But I think it's a price that we need to pay in order to fulfill our mission to help people who are in, worse situations, ordinary people, news consumers are being attacked and targeted by false information more than we are attacked by harassment. So I think it's our duty to fulfill that mission.
Finally, we asked rsek about the role of fact-checking in today's society.
Fact-checking can save lives, and it empowers people. Because with holding the powerful accountable, informed people can be stronger and basically, put a pressure on the elected officials, politicians, so they can feel more responsible and act accordingly. In an ideal world, I would assume people would be more protected against false information by themselves. Again, similar to how we check the ingredients in our food, I think we also need to make sure that we know what is in our news, because news, similar to all other needs that we have, is essential. We need to make sure that we have better service, we have better quality in such an essential service as news and information. And the more time we spend on the internet, the more time we spend on our friends and colleagues sharing, exchanging information, we are becoming more accustomed to false information. And the more that we can be the agents of fact-checking in our local communities, digital communities, I think we can make a big difference. And we as the consumers need to be at the center of this fight and be more cautious and be more mindful and sensitive about things that we share. And the more that we not share unverified information, the spread of misinformation will drop dramatically. So we are the consumers are the first one to make that difference.